Chapter 329. She met Qin Shuhua at her favorite French restaurant. In her previous life, she had studied table etiquette in order to please Qin Shuhua. She had crammed the knowledge in this area so that she wouldn't be embarrassed when she invited Qin Shuhua to dinner. However, later, she found out. It was not that she was not good enough, but Tang Menjing was too good. She could not compete with her. Qin Shuhua booked a VIP room. When she was taken in by the waiter, Su Qianxi immediately saw her elegant mother-in-law sitting inside. Seeing her come in, Qin Shuhua waved her hand and said, "You can serve the food." "Mom." Su Qianxi sat down and let the waiter prepare the food for her. Qin Shuhua nodded and took a sip of water. She seemed to clear her throat and said, "These days, you did not stay at home?" "Yes." "Why?" Su Qianxi pursed her lips and looked at Qin Shuhua. Qin Shuhua looked happier than usual. Faintly, Su Qianxi saw the calculation in Qin Shuhua's eyes. Her heart sank. Su Qianxi curled her lips and said, "Mom, you wanted to see me today. Did you need something?" The waiter had already served the food. The first dish was a French mussels. "I already know." Qin Shuhua looked at her with a faint smile. "You still want to hide it from me?" "What?" Su Qianxi did not understand. "The contract." Su Qianxi's pupils shrank. Hearing this word, she inexplicably panicked. "Contract? What contract?" Pretending to be calm, Su Qianxi looked at Qin Shuhua with some doubt in her eyes. "Contract?" The waiter quickly brought a Saint Jacques scallop. The exquisite meal was like a beautiful work of art. Then, there was fried fish, crispy onion soup. Su Qianxi suddenly chuckled with sarcasm. This was Tang Menjing's taste. Qin Shuhua seemed to also notice that Su Qianxi had noticed. She coughed and said, "I am a little hungry, so I ordered first. If you do not like these, you can order something else." "Okay." Qin Shuhua dismissed the waiter and said, "Let's eat first. We will talk after eating." However, there was a stone in her heart that Su Qianxi could not eat. Moreover, none of these were what she liked to eat. After taking a few bites, she couldn't eat any more and went straight to the point. "Mom, why did you call me today? Are you full?" Qin Shuhua glanced at the almost untouched dishes in front of her. What a waste. What if Su Qianxi was also angry and sneered, "Mom, all these are Tang Menjing's favorites. I don't like to eat this kind of food at all. If you don't want to waste it, shouldn't you ask her out?" Qin Shuhua did not expect Su Qianxi to talk back and looked at her in surprise. Su Qianxi glanced at the time on her phone and said, "Why don't we call her now and ask her to come here? Maybe she can catch up with the heat." "What do you mean?" "Mom, what do you mean?" Qin Shuhua was furious. She opened her purse, took out the contract she had hidden, and threw it at Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat, and her arrogance disappeared in an instant. Looking down at the 4 words, her mind went blank. Divorce contract? How did it fall into Qin Shuhua's hands? Chapter 330. How do you explain this? Qin Shuhua sounded a bit angry. Divorce contract? I didn't know you were so scheming and capable. I really don't know how Captain Li fell for you. For the title of Mrs. Li, you and your mother have set up such a big trap. Su Qianxi's heart raced. However, looking at the furious Qin Shuhua, he calmed down. He looked at her coldly and asked, "Where did you get this thing?" Divorce contract. 1 year. Now it had been almost 7 months, and there was less than half a year left. On it was her signature, Li Xiqing's signature, and the lawyer's seal. "You don't need to know where I got it." Qin Shuhua seemed a little agitated. She stood up and said, "You had such an agreement with my son from the very beginning. Then, who is the father of the child you miscarried?" Su Qianxi seemed to have returned to her previous lifetime, when she was despised by everyone. Qin Shuhua's expression still did not change at all. However, Su Qianxi was no longer that Su Qianxi. With a cold face, Su Qianxi also stood up and said slowly, "Mom, I call you Mom because I really treat you as my mother." Qin Shuhua looked at Su Qianxi incredulously, not expecting her mother to talk to her like this. "But are you sure that what you are doing now, is behaving like a mother? If my child is not Li Xiqing's, do you think your son will let me go? Do you think Mr. Li can tolerate me putting on such a big green hat for him?" Qin Shuhua paused. Indeed, no one knew Li Xiqing better than she did. Li Xiqing's personality was extremely domineering, and he could not tolerate even a grain of sand. "I know that you have never liked me and have never treated me as your daughter-in-law. I know that. But why are you trying so hard to bring Li Xiqing and Tang Menjing together?" Su Qianxi really could not figure it out. "Last time at the party, you clearly saw that the death of the child had something to do with Tang Menjing. If it were not for her, my child would be almost 7 months old now. Maybe before the new year, the child would be born. In less than 2 years, he might be able to call you grandma and call me mom." Qin Shuhua was a bit moved. Looking at Su Qianxi's hateful face, she was a bit dumbfounded. She thought that Su Qianxi had no temper. It turned out that the little woman who only knew to stand behind Li Xiqing or Li Sun could have such a powerful side. "But, Mom." Su Qianxi looked pained. "The child is dead, killed by Tang Menjing. You did not question her or scold her. Why are you doing this to me now? Mom, this is too unfair." Qin Shuhua looked at her and coldly laughed. "I'll believe that the child is my son's, but what about yours? How do you explain that?" Su Qianxi looked at the divorce contract in front of her, and a white light flashed in her mind. Things that she could not figure out before suddenly became clear. He chuckled softly, and an indescribably complicated expression flowed between his brows as he slowly said, "Did he ask you to find me?" "Him? Li Xiqing?" Qin Shuhua looked at her in surprise. Su Qianxi's eyes became more and more wet. He wanted to divorce early so that Tang Menjing and his child could officially become part of the Li family, right? So, this secret that only belonged to them appeared in Qin Shuhua's hands, so that she could force her to divorce, right? Chapter 331. As long as she did not leave, Tang Menjing would be the mistress. She wanted Tang Menjing's child to be born as an illegitimate child. She wanted her to abdicate and let the mother and son take over? No way. Looking at Qin Shuhua's slightly shocked eyes, Su Qianxi picked up her bag and turned to leave. After paying the bill, Su Qianxi took a taxi and went home. Su Qianxi thought she would cry, but after getting in the car, she unexpectedly found that her heart was extremely empty. Her eyes were strangely dry. Leaning against the back seat, Su Qianxi only felt that her mood was depressed to the extreme, as if the next second, she could be pulled into a bottomless abyss. Taking a deep breath, she opened the window and saw the bright and luxurious street view going back. The cold wind of October poured in, making Su Qianxi shiver. A place appeared in her mind. Su Qianxi looked away and said, "Master, let's go to Kingstown Tower." Kingstown Tower was located in the center of Kingstown. It was surrounded by many famous office buildings and classic coordinates of Kingstown. After buying a ticket, Su Qianxi went directly to the top floor, walked to the transparent area on the edge, and looked down. Her heart was beating like thunder. However, he soon emptied his mind and looked into the distance. Thousands of lights were bright, and the road was illuminated by warm yellow street lights. Cars were coming and going like running water. Looking down, it was the largest river in Kingstown. On the river, beautiful and luxurious ships were slowly moving, leaving countless beautiful and gorgeous sceneries. Spectacular. After so many years in Kingstown, it was the first time that Su Qianxi saw the city like this. She couldn't help but feel lost, and her thoughts went further and further. The phone in her bag vibrated. Su Qianxi looked down and was shocked by the scenery under her feet. Her first reaction was to take a step back, and then she remembered that she was standing on Kingstown Tower. Feeling the eyes around her, Su Qianxi felt a bit embarrassed. Blushing, she walked to a place with fewer people. Picking up the phone, she saw the call was from Luihan. "Hi, Qianqian." "Hi," turn around and look back. Su Qianxi was dazed and subconsciously turned her head. Luihan held the phone and looked at her with a bright smile. Under the rimless glasses, a pair of peach blossom eyes were filled with tenderness. "Why are you here?" she exclaimed. "Are you following me?" Hearing this, Luihan took a step back and shouted, "Go to hell." "Who's following you?" "Shameless. I'm here to accompany a client." She looked behind him. "Where are your clients?" "Yes, I said I had met a good friend, and she said she was going." "By yourself?" "Yes." "Tisk tsk, just in time. Accompany me to eat." "I haven't eaten yet." "You don't eat with your clients?" They didn't eat either, but the couple went to get special treatment and ignored me. Sigh. Single dogs have no human rights. Luihan was so angry that he almost wanted to scratch the wall. She laughed and looked reluctant. "Well, I haven't eaten yet anyway. Let's eat together." Luihan looked at her, his smile deepening, and nodded. "Yes, let's go together." After dinner, it was after 9 p.m. Luihan was very good at chatting. In less than 3 hours, Su Qianxi's depressed mood that was about to go crazy was quickly relieved. Luihan started the car and offered to take her home. She did not refuse and directly told him Song Yifan's address. Chatting and laughing along the way, they soon arrived at their destination. Luihan parked the car at the gate of the community and walked Su Qianxi up. However, just as she reached the bottom of the stairs, a figure forcefully bumped into her eyes. Chapter 332. Li Xiqing stood in the light of dusk, wearing a dark gray trench coat. His tall figure cast a long shadow on Su Qianxi. Seeing Su Qianxi walking with Luihan, Li Xiqing's cold and deep eyes became even colder, like a cold pond in winter, bottomless. Seeing him, Luihan couldn't help but think of the last time he did not come. Although he was not happy, he was Qianqian's husband, so Luihan could only swallow his unhappiness. Originally, he wanted to go upstairs to have some tea and see what kind of person Qianqian's father was. However, at this moment, seeing Li Xiqing's obviously unfriendly face, Luihan knew that this was not a good place to stay. He laughed and said, "Qianqian, I'll go first." "Well, thank you for today, Ihan." "You're welcome. Bye." Luihan walked down the stairs, shaking his car key and walking toward his red Renault. Li Xiqing did not say a word from the beginning to the end. He slowly took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, took one out, and lit it with a lighter. Slowly, he took a puff. As if she did not see him, Su Qianxi took out her card, swiped the access code, and walked in. Li Xiqing followed her, but Su Qianxi walked extremely fast, as if she was avoiding something. After entering the elevator, she directly pressed the close button. A big hand blocked between them, and Li Xiqing squeezed his body in. His cold face seemed to be tighter, and a pair of cold eyes stared at her like a cold eagle, sharp and deep. Su Qianxi did not look at him and pressed the 16th floor, as if she did not see him. Li Xiqing took a step closer, and Su Qianxi was scared and stepped back, hitting the wall of the elevator. With a big hand next to her, Li Xiqing held a cigarette between his long fingers. The smoke slowly rose, and soon, the entire elevator was filled with the smell of smoke. Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes, and Su Qianxi only felt a sense of danger. "Avoiding me?" Li Xiqing stared at her, his voice low. Su Qianxi's breathing suddenly quickened, but she still turned her head and did not look at him. Ding! When the elevator arrived, she was about to walk around him, but her hand was grabbed. He was so strong that Su Qianxi's arm was caught off guard and hurt. "Let me go." Su Qianxi's voice was a bit choked. When she said it, even she was shocked. Looking back, she saw a pair of eyes. She felt that she was about to be drowned, so deep, struggling hard, she got rid of him and ran to the door of her house. However, the more anxious he was, the more he couldn't find the bunch of keys. Her heart was beating faster and faster. She clearly sensed that he was already behind her, but she had not found the key yet. The faint white smoke blew past her ear, carrying the smell of tobacco, tickling her face. Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat. Inexplicably, she no longer had the strength to squat down. Her vision blurred. Gritting her teeth, Su Qianxi poured out everything in the small bag. Her cell phone, keycard, cosmetics, wallet, and finally, a bunch of keys fell out with a jingle. Chapter 333. Picking up the things one by one, she put them back in her bag and stood up. Su Qianxi looked up at the man behind her who was almost leaning against her. The familiar smell, the strong male hormones, and the face that she knew so well, Li Xiqing stretched out his hand and pressed her against the wall. His deep and cold eyes were even more intense, as if he was going to suck her in. She looked up at him and felt a lump in her throat. Guilty? Li Xiqing's voice was deep and mellow like the sound of a cello. She bit her lower lip, turned her head, and reached out to push him away. However, Li Xiqing did not move at all. He looked at her with a deeper gaze. Pressing her down, he did not let her escape and said slowly, "What are you afraid of? Tell me." Su Qianxi did not speak. Tears ran down her cheeks and wet her face. Li Xiqing's eyes softened a bit. Holding her hand, he took her key and said, "Go in. It's cold outside. Don't go in." She sobbed but was firm. "If you have anything to say it here. I will go in and help you move your things. I will take you home. This is my home, Mr. Li. You go back. I will not go back with you." Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes and looked dangerous, but he still said patiently, "Don't be naughty. It is not good to disturb father-in-law Song. Dad went to London. Then, I will stay here with you today." Su Qianxi resisted and pushed him, shaking her head hard. "No." Li Xiqing put an arm around her waist, looked at her and asked, "What's wrong with you? Are you afraid that I will scold you? Or that I will hurt Luihan?" Shaking her head again and again, Su Qianxi was choked and could not speak. "I do not object to you making friends. Just keep your distance." Li Xiqing was already very close to her. "Luihan is your good friend. I was too impulsive last time. I found out later, and I am also very grateful to him. When there is a chance, can you take me to him to apologize and thank him in person?" Although he still did not like to see them together. However, he was the one who saved Su Qianxi. Apologizing and thanking him was something he should do. Putting his face close to hers, Li Xiqing's eyes were full of tenderness. He whispered, "You know, I miss you so much." The faint smell of tobacco filled the tip of her nose. Hearing this, Su Qianxi's heart was even more painful, trembling and cramping. He said he missed her. He said he missed her. However, he had been on a business trip with Tang Menjing for a whole week. Now that he had returned from his business trip, he came to miss her. Or Tang Menjing's health was not good for him to travel, so he came to miss her? She couldn't help but burst into tears. Pushing him away, her hand reached out and landed on his face. "Pa." Dazed, Li Xiqing looked at her. When she was about to slap him for the second time, Li Xiqing's eyes darkened. He grabbed her hand and growled, "Are you crazy?" Li Xiqing had never been treated like this before. Ever since he was young, his life had been smooth sailing. He had only been beaten by this woman when he was 26 years old, and she had even beaten him twice. Su Qianxi's body trembled, and her back was against the wall. Looking at him, she burst into tears. Why did you do this to me?" Li Xiqing felt even more puzzled. Looking at her, he said angrily, "Su Qianxi." He was the one who was slapped, and he had not cried yet. Why was she crying? However, he saw Su Qianxi's hand was going to take off her coat. She was only wearing a tank top. Taking it off, her white and delicate skin was exposed, which deeply stimulated Li Xiqing's vision. Then, she lifted the tank top. Startled, Li Xiqing went up and pressed her hand down, growling, "Are you crazy? This is still the door." Chapter 334. Li Xiqing suddenly tightened his grip on her hand. Gazing at her with a pair of cold eyes, he said in a cold voice, "What do you mean?" Su Qianxi's hand was pried open, and her chin was pinched by him. Looking up, she saw his cold eyes. It was as if a violent storm was about to engulf her. Su Qianxi's heart trembled. Looking at him, she reached out and continued to lift her shirt. He pulled her hand up and pressed her down. Gritting his teeth, he looked at her and almost roared, "What do you mean by this?" Did she think that he came here just to have sex with her? Su Qianxi's back was pressed against the cold wall, her body shivering. In the face of the storm that almost tore her apart, she forced a sneer and endured the heartache. With a look of disdain, she said word by word, "What are you pretending for? The people outside can't satisfy you, so you came to me, didn't you?" The people outside? Li Xiqing's heart felt like it had been bitten by a mad dog, and a piece of it was gone in an instant. Dripping with blood, it was riddled with holes. The hand pinching her chin tightened, and his fist hit the wall behind her ear. Bang! With a muffled sound, Su Qianxi was scared. Her legs became weak, and she almost fell. However, the breath hanging in her heart did not allow her to fall. Biting her lower lip, she looked at him stubbornly, her body shivering slightly. Li Xiqing looked at her, sneered, and bent down to pick up the coat that Su Qianxi had just thrown away. Su Qianxi's eyelashes trembled, and her tears fell on his head, sinking into his hair. Li Xiqing paused and quickly picked up the coat. Seeing her trembling in fear, as if she was a hedgehog facing a formidable enemy, his heart skipped a beat. Throwing the coat at her face, Li Xiqing said in a low voice with suppressed anger, "I really want to strangle you." His voice was so vicious that Su Qianxi was scared and shrank back. Seeing this, Li Xiqing suddenly chuckled. "I must be crazy to let you do this to me." His deep and mellow voice echoed in the corridor. The sound of leather shoes faded away, and Su Qianxi could only see darkness. It was only when he heard the elevator ring that he pulled his jacket off his face. He stared at the empty corridor in a daze. After a long while, she picked up the key and walked in. She threw herself on the bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind blank. "My head hurts so much." Not knowing how long she had been lying there, she took her phone out of her bag, found Li Xiqing's number, and sent several text messages. "Mr. Li, I know everything about your business trip. Mr. Li, your mother looked for me today. She used our contract to force me to divorce you. I refused and told her a lot. I never knew I could be so eloquent. Mr. Li, I will not divorce you. There are still more than 5 months left in the divorce contract. I will release you after your sentence is completed. Li Xiqing, I love you." She felt like she had seen a ghost. "Why?" Li Xiqing, who was usually calm and composed, was seriously injured and went to the bar. Not only did he drink, but he also fought. Chapter 335. She wanted to cry but had no tears. She called the boss's wife to come over, but she was stopped by her boss. "If you dare to call her, you don't have to follow me anymore." So, the lady boss still didn't know that he was injured? Did she really think that he had come back from a business trip? Qing Yu was full of grief and indignation. Just when she decided to stay here to get some overtime pay, he kicked her out. Before leaving, he asked, "Where is my cell phone?" "It's broken. The front and back screens are seriously broken." "It has been sent for repair," she said. "I got you a new one. Here you go." He glanced at it, pinched his eyebrows, and said, "Okay, you can go back now." When Qing Yu was about to leave, she was stopped again. "Wait. Is there anything else? Did she call?" Her. Qing Yu was dazed for a second before she realized who it was. She shook her head and said, "No. The previous one was broken and turned off. I haven't received any calls from Mrs. Li," she did receive a few calls from clients. The light in Li Xiqing's eyes dimmed a bit. Then, with a wave of his hand, he lay back down. It was hard to tell what he was thinking. No one had come back to the house for half a month, and Nanny Rong was a bit panicked. She made a phone call to the old house. Nanny Rong more or less wanted to complain. When she heard Captain Li's raised voice, Nanny Rong knew that the people in the old house did not know about the couple's quarrel. Laughing awkwardly, Nanny Rong said, "Maybe they are living outside. After all, Sir doesn't only have one house." Nonsense. That boy would not do something like that. Something must have happened. Old Master Li roared angrily, "This is ridiculous. I was wondering why Qianqian has been acting weird on the phone recently. This is great. That guy must have bullied her." Nanny Rong was speechless. In her eyes, Su Qianxi was his granddaughter, and Li Xiqing was the one who came to visit. "I understand. Don't worry about it. Leave it to me." "Okay." As soon as Nanny Rong said that, Grandpa Xing hung up. The phone in the old house was from the 1920s and 1930s. Putting his finger in the hole, he dialed Li Xiqing's number. Captain Li was ready to scold Li Xiqing at any time. However, no one picked up. Then, he dialed 2 more, and the results were the same. After about half an hour, Li Xiqing called back. The old man wanted to curse even more. He opened his mouth and shouted, "You're going to die. You don't even answer your grandfather's phone. You're rebelling." After a second of silence, Li Xiqing said quietly, "Grandpa, I was in a meeting." Meeting. You only know how to attend meetings. Every time I call you, it's because you're in a meeting. What's the use of earning so much money? If you have the heart, why don't you go and please your wife? Otherwise, when your wife runs away, you'll be crying. Li Xiqing did not say anything and looked at the calendar on the table. It had been 7 days since they last met. Dead? Say something. Old Master Li was furious. Yes, not dead. What's the matter, Grandpa? Captain Li suddenly felt angry and roared, "You're rebelling. I just said so much, and you didn't hear a word?" Yes. Chapter 336. When Li Xiqing heard the roar, he frowned and said softly, "She will not go back with me." "Well, I don't care. If I don't see you two come back today, I will definitely have a heart attack, and then I will be pissed to death by you. Grandpa, since you know I am your grandpa, behave yourself. It must be your fault again. Our Qianqian is such a good girl. Say, why are you angry with her every day? Everything is fine. Why can't a husband and wife talk things out? Why do you have to do these things all day? Are you trying to piss me off? Grandpa, shut up. I don't want to listen. I will give you an hour to bring your wife back for dinner. If I don't see you later, then I won't eat. I will starve to death." Lu Sa, who was listening on the side, couldn't help laughing secretly. Captain Li was so old. How could he still be so childish? How could he play the game of hunger strike? However, Li Xiqing couldn't stand it the most. With a sigh, Li Xiqing said, "Got it. You won't starve to death. Well, that's more like it." Captain Li hung up the phone with satisfaction and sat back on the sofa with his cane. However, the more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. Suddenly, he said, "Oh no, how long did Xiao Rong say they haven't been home?" Lu Sa thought for a moment and said, "More than half a month." Li Xiqing hung up the phone and let out a long sigh. After telling Qing Yu to do the next thing, the rest became irrelevant. However, Li Xiqing was still slowly reading the documents in his seat. Qing Yu went out and came back. Seeing that Li Xiqing was still there, she was a little surprised and asked, "Boss, aren't you going back to the old house?" "Well." Li Xiqing responded, looked up and said, "Ask Yang to call and ask when her class is over." "Okay. Don't say I asked." Qing Yu was speechless. "Come on," Qing Yu was very busy. Why couldn't she let others do this kind of small thing? But he was the boss, so Ching Yu could not refuse. 2 minutes later, she quickly replied, there is one elective class left. Get ready for class. Okay, Li Xiqing responded and leaned back in his chair. Then, should we let little Yang pick them up? Yes. She replied to Yang on WeChat, but as soon as the message was sent, he changed his mind. Forget it. I'll go by myself. Ching Yu, don't tell her. Oh. She left the office, and he finished approving all the documents. It only took him 10 minutes at the slowest speed. Helpless, he opened the drawer, intending to place the documents inside. However, the moment he pulled the drawer open, he saw a black phone. The phone had been fixed for a long time, but it was broken, and he had no intention of using it again. He stuffed the documents into the folder, locked it, got up, and left the office. Su Qianxi walked out of the school with her bag in her arms and immediately saw the cool black Maybach. She stopped and seemed to have guessed who was in the car. When Yang and Li Xiqing were in China at the same time, Yang would not drive this car. Chapter 337. As she approached, the window of the Maybach was rolled down. Li Xiqing's cold and determined face was revealed. The familiar curve, the familiar profile, the familiar edge, Su Qianxi's eyes were involuntarily attracted to him. Li Xiqing turned his head. His eyes were cold and deep, but when looked closely, they were unfathomable. Deliberately looking away, Su Qianxi held her backpack and was about to walk around him. The car started moving and blocked her way in an instant. Get in the car. It was an order that could not be denied. His voice was deep and familiar. Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat. Looking at her, he said slowly, Grandpa wants you to go back to the old house. Grandpa, Su Qianxi pursed her lips, opened the door of the passenger seat, and sat in. Let's go. Li Xiqing looked at her with a deeper gaze. Su Qianxi clearly felt his gaze, so deep and intense. Feeling a bit nervous, she still pretended to be calm, but her hand holding her backpack tightened. Suddenly, Li Xiqing moved. He leaned over, and the distance between the two was shortened. Su Qianxi was startled and shrank back. Turning her head, she saw a pair of cold eyes. Subconsciously, she held her breath and looked at him. Li Xiqing looked down and glanced at her, finding that she was slightly trembling, looking at him as if she was facing a formidable enemy. In an instant, Li Xiqing clearly felt that his heart, which he thought had become numb from all the work, was being whipped again, burning with pain. Was it that scary? He could not understand what kind of existence he was in her eyes. Su Qianxi clearly noticed that his eyes were slightly dim. Her heart fluttered, and there was a flash of surprise in her eyes. However, before she could figure it out, he had already walked away. At the same time, holding the seat belt in his hand, he pressed the button on the lower left corner. He silently started the car and drove steadily in the direction of the old house. No one spoke on the way. No one spoke first, and the atmosphere was so quiet that it was awkward. When they arrived at the old house, it was almost 6 p.m. It was dinner time. Lu Sa put the dishes on the table. Seeing Li Xiqing coming in, she was a bit surprised and said, Captain, the young master is back. Captain Li came out with a cane. When he saw Li Xiqing, he was about to lose his temper. However, when he saw Su Qianxi behind him, he immediately calmed down. He snorted and walked towards them. Su Qianxi hurried to hold Grandpa and called, Grandpa, are you looking for me? Humph, I'm not looking for you, I'm looking for you. The old man was very unhappy. Let's eat first. Yes. Qin Shuhua walked out from inside. When she saw the two of them, there was a meaningful look on her face. It was rare for Li Xiao to be at home. Seeing his second son and daughter-in-law come back, he was in a good mood. He pushed his wife and said, Let's eat. The family sat at the table, and Captain Li naturally sat at the head of the table. He took the bowl handed over by Lu Sa, looked at Li Xiqing, and said, Where did you say you were going to hold the wedding last time? Wedding, what a distant word. When Su Qianxi heard this, she paused eating and looked at Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing looked indifferent, glanced at Su Qianxi, and said slowly, I forgot. Chapter 338. Su Qianxi's heart felt like it had been stabbed. Holding the chopsticks, she slightly tightened her hand, lowered her head, and picked up the bowl of rice. Grandpa heard Li Xiqing's answer and was furious. He directly threw the chopsticks on the table and said, What do you mean forget? Are you so busy with work? Li Xiqing did not speak, holding the chopsticks to pick up the food, eating slowly, his movements elegant and dignified. Grandpa was furious. Looking at Su Qianxi, he said, Qianqian, has he been so weird these days? Sarcastic. Li Xiqing paused. Su Qianxi put down the bowl and said, No. Of course not. Grandpa had already seen through everything. Hey. He is busy with work, so it is normal for him to forget, Su Qianxi explained in a low voice. Reaching out her hand, she picked some food for herself and ate slowly as if she did not care. Li Xiqing did the same, eating slowly and looking as calm as usual. Grandpa could only watch anxiously. He glared angrily and stood up. Grandpa, eat, Li Xiqing called, but his voice was calm and did not sound sincere. Su Qianxi put down the bowl and quickly greeted him, saying, Grandpa, eat first. We can talk about this later, okay? Grandpa heard it and glanced at Li Xiqing. Seeing that Li Xiqing did not mean to refuse, he snorted and turned around to sit down. He knew his grandson too well. As long as he did not refuse on the spot, there was still room for improvement. It seemed that this matter was not entirely Li Xiqing's fault. Grandpa picked up the chopsticks, ate a few mouthfuls, and soon said he was full. Su Qianxi helped Grandpa take a walk in the back garden. When they came back, it was already 10 minutes later. Li Xiqing was sitting on the sofa on the phone, listening to the content. It was business. Grandpa sat quietly on the side, and Su Qianxi was peeling an apple for him. However, when Grandpa finished the apple, Li Xiqing was still on the phone. Grandpa stared and threw the apple core over, looking like a warning. Li Xiqing did not dodge, but caught the apple core firmly and threw it into the trash can. He took a wet tissue and wiped his hands, but his tone did not change. After a minute or two, the phone was hung up. Tonight, Qianqian, stay here with Grandpa. Grandpa sighed. Although he was talking to Su Qianxi, he was glancing at Li Xiqing. I don't have many days left. I can die in peace if I can spend more time with my grandson. Grandpa. Su Qianxi felt sad. You will live for a long time. Humph. If you continue like this, even if I can live for 100 years, I will be a few decades younger. She was speechless and looked at him. Li Xiqing met her eyes for less than a second before he looked away and said casually, Then stay. I have something to do at the company. If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way. Captain Li was so angry that he picked up an apple in front of him and threw it at Li Xiqing, roaring, You stay too. Li Xiqing dodged and said confidently, I'm busy at the company. Chapter 339. This time, Li Xiqing caught the apple firmly and put it back without saying anything. Su Qianxi sat on the side and did not say a word. Qin Shuhua and Li Xiao went to the neighbor's house and saw this scene. Li Xiao's face darkened and he said, Xiqing, don't make your grandfather mad. Li Xiqing curled his lips and glanced at Su Qianxi, saying, No one wants to see me. Why should I stay here? As soon as he said that, the people present were not fools. They knew what was going on the moment they heard it. All of a sudden, Su Qianxi attracted everyone's attention. Condemnation, contempt, love, and ambiguity surrounded her. She felt her scalp tingling and said, I did not. Captain Li stared at her, picked up another apple, and threw it at her, yelling, What else do you have to say? Li Xiqing was hit in the stomach by the apple and was speechless. Picking up the apple and putting it back on the coffee table, Li Xiqing stood up and said, I'm going to take a shower. Seeing this, Qin Shuhua looked at Su Qianxi with a faint smile. Su Qianxi looked back at her, fearlessly staring into her eyes. "You're quite something to be able to push my son like this." Qin Shuhua said something ambiguous and walked away. "Li Xiao, I have something to tell you." "Okay." Li Xiao nodded and looked at Su Qianxi thoughtfully. He said, "Don't let the elders worry about you. You are not young anymore. Don't worry too much. Xiqing is good to you." Li Xiao did not have much feelings for Su Qianxi. Although she was beautiful, she was a typical girl from a humble family. At the beginning, because she was personally chosen by Captain Li, he did not say anything. He did not expect that now, his son was in a tight spot. Although Li Xiqing did not say it, he cared a lot about his wife. At least, he had never seen Li Xiqing treat anyone like this since he was a child. The people of the Li clan were all stubborn. Su Qianxi looked down, nodded, and said, "I know, Dad." Without another word, Li Xiao followed Qin Shuhua into the study. "Don't listen to your father. If that kid bullies you, tell me. I'll back you up." Captain Li was not convinced. He patted his chest and said, "I'll always be your safe haven." She felt a lump in her throat, and her eyes were soon wet. Nodding, she sniffed and whispered, "Grandpa. Why are you so nice to me? If I don't treat you well, should I treat Li Xiqing well? That guy is an ingrate, humph. I'm still counting on you to give me a chubby great-grandson." In addition, with Li Xiqing's temper, if he could marry a wife, he should be very grateful. Which ordinary person could stand him? It just so happened that he had met someone he liked, and that kid also liked. Of course, he had to make her stay and spread the seeds for the Li family. However, he did not say it out loud. Seeing Su Qianxi's touched look, he was very proud. Fortunately, his granddaughter-in-law was this little girl, who was easy to coax and satisfy. If it was that girl from the Tang family, thinking of Tang Menjing, Captain Li couldn't help feeling depressed. The smile on his face faded, but he quickly changed the topic with Su Qianxi. After chatting for a while, Captain Li felt tired and let her go back to her room. Su Qianxi stood at the door of the room. Thinking that she would be alone with him, she felt embarrassed. She did not know how to face him. Chapter 340. As soon as she entered the room, she smelled the faint smell of tobacco in the room. Walking in, a cold wind blew, and Su Qianxi shivered subconsciously. The window was wide open, and the white curtain was fluttering in the wind. It was already dark outside. The moon was bright, and the trees were swaying in the wind. Li Xiqing stood by the window, wearing the same straight suit. His elbow was leaning against the window, a cigarette between his long fingers. The smoke was blown in by the wind. The ash was already very long, shaking on the edge of the vent. Noticing that someone had come in, Li Xiqing did not intend to turn around. Slowly shaking the ash into the ashtray, his voice was low and calm. "In the wind," he said, "do you hate me a lot?" The unexpected question fell into Su Qianxi's ears, making her heart skip a beat. Like a planet hit by a meteorite, there was a violent impact in an instant. "Do you hate me a lot?" It was just a few words, but it had evoked all the grievances and sorrows in her heart. Looking at his back, Su Qianxi's eyes gradually dimmed, and a layer of mist came over her without warning. "How could it be? How could I hate you? You are Li Xiqing." However, she quickly wiped the water off and pretended not to hear it, turning around and rummaging through the closet. Although they had not been back for a while, in the closet, Lu Sa had already changed into autumn clothes for them, so that they could come back at any time. After rummaging through a set of pajamas, Su Qianxi went into the bathroom and could not help but burst into tears. She was not a person who liked to cry. Even when she was beaten up by those rich women last time, she gritted her teeth and did not have the urge to cry at all. However, every time she saw Li Xiqing, her tears seemed to be opened and could not be held back. The influence he had over her was too great, no matter in her previous lifetime or this lifetime, she could not feel anything for him. Every time she saw him, she would feel her heart pounding. How could she hate Li Xiqing like this? Li Xiqing clearly heard her footsteps moving away. He put out the cigarette, closed the window, and sat on the sofa next to the bed. After a long silence, there was a knock on the door. It was Lu Sa who opened the door. "Second young master, this is the tonic that old master told second young mistress to drink. Please give it to second young mistress later." Li Xiqing glanced at it and frowned. "It's not good to have dessert at night. Io, you're not the one drinking it. You can give it to second young mistress. This is specially prepared by the old master for her." "Okay." Li Xiqing took it. "Got it. You can have some too. It tastes good." Lu Sa smiled slyly and glanced inside. "She's taking a shower. Just give it to me." "Oh, okay." Lu Sa gave the tray to Li Xiqing, closed the door, and left. However, after Lu Sa went out, the expression on her face gradually became worried. She walked into the living room and saw the old man. She said, "Will it backfire? What if second young master misunderstands something?" Chapter 341. Coming out of the shower, Su Qianxi tried to calm herself down. Seeing him smoking on the sofa next to the bed, she just glanced at him, dried her hair, and sat down on the bed. "Grandpa asked Lu Sa to make you a tonic. Drink it while it's hot," Li Xiqing said, stood up and walked into the bathroom. Su Qianxi glanced at the small bowl on the table. It was bird's nest with red dates and rock sugar. She felt it with her hand and found it was just right. She tasted it. It was sweet, smooth, and delicious. She finished it in a few gulps, put the bowl back, and began to blow-dry her hair. Perhaps because the hairdryer was on, Su Qianxi felt a bit hot. Putting on her cotton shoes, she took the small bowl outside and opened the fridge to pour a glass of milk. After finishing it, she went back to the room. However, after returning to the room, Su Qianxi felt even hotter and a bit uncomfortable. Opening the window, the cold wind blew in, making Su Qianxi feel refreshed. Standing by the window for a while, Su Qianxi felt more and more confused. Leaning against the window, she felt a bit dizzy. The sound of water in the bathroom stopped, and the door quickly opened. Su Qianxi did not look back, but she seemed to see his body in front of her. Sexy, wheat-colored skin, well-defined muscle lines, and that pure white bath towel that was filled with explosive power, so shameful. Su Qianxi covered her face and found that it was shockingly hot. So hot, Su Qianxi tugged at her nightgown and said to herself, "This dress is too thick." Li Xiqing seemed to have heard her words. He glanced at her and did not care. Taking a dry towel, he dried his hair. The wind was a bit strong, and the curtain was lifted. Feeling a bit cold, Li Xiqing threw the towel down and said, "Close the window." But Su Qianxi did not seem to hear it, standing still. Li Xiqing frowned, walked up slowly, pushed her away, and closed the window without looking at her. Seeing that he only had a bath towel on, Su Qianxi felt even more thirsty. Stepping back, she plunged into the bed and quickly covered her face with the quilt. Why, as soon as she saw him, she had an urge to ravage him. What the hell? Obviously, she wasn't that thirsty. She snuggled in the quilt, feeling even more uncomfortable. His skin was shockingly hot, and waves of heat assaulted him, but there wasn't a single drop of sweat on his body. It was as if he was suffering from a fever. She unconsciously moaned and wriggled. Lifting the quilt, she felt very comfortable with the cool air on her skin. So hot, so hot. She quietly put one leg under the bed and lifted her skirt a little. Feeling the cold air on her leg, she finally felt better. However, she caught a glimpse of Li Xiqing's strange look. She shrank her head like an ostrich and covered her face with the quilt, not letting him see. Seeing her like this, Li Xiqing simply ignored her and pulled the towel away. He slowly took out a silk robe and put it on. However, seeing that body, she subconsciously clamped her legs and shamefully thought of how he looked when he entered her. This. Chapter 342. Startled, Li Xiqing's first reaction was to run over and pick her up, only to find that her body was shockingly hot. Covering her face, she did not even dare to raise her head. It was too embarrassing. She had fallen to the ground while lying down. She felt that she was in the terminal stage of embarrassment and could not be saved. However, when she touched his bare chest, she felt a cold sensation surrounding her. She couldn't help but curl up into a ball as she greedily shrunk into his embrace. It was a completely subconscious movement. When she realized what she had done, she was completely in his arms. Subconsciously, she wanted to leave, but Li Xiqing's hand grabbed her and touched her forehead with his slightly rough hand. Hot. Shockingly hot. Li Xiqing frowned and said in a slightly reproachful tone, "You have a fever, and you still open the window." Then he picked her up and put her on the bed. She only felt more dizzy. Grabbing his robe, she tore off a corner of it. Suddenly, she saw a long wound at the junction of his arm and the side of his back. The wound had scabbed off, but it had not completely fallen off. Part of the pink skin was exposed, which was particularly eye-catching under his weak-colored skin. "You're hurt?" she exclaimed and reached out to touch it. Li Xiqing grabbed her hand and pulled up the robe with the other hand. Su Qianxi's eyes couldn't help looking down. He pulled up his sleeping robe, but his chest was loose. His smooth and muscular chest was clearly defined and his outline was clear. She felt her mouth was dry and even hotter. Blushing, she looked away and fanned herself, saying, "It's so hot, hot?" Li Xiqing frowned even more. "It's so hot, and it's still hot?" She did not speak, only feeling that she was blacking out. Subconsciously clamping her legs together, her white and plump thighs rubbing against each other under her dress. As she moved, she couldn't help looking at him. Desire. From her eyes, Li Xiqing saw the word that she did not hide. What the hell? Li Xiqing turned his body to avoid her eyes, but she quickly looked at him with a bit of pitiful eyes. His cold and deep eyes glanced down at her face. Her cheeks were flushed and she was drunk. Her watery black eyes were filled with lust. She bit her lower lip and her eyes were blurry but filled with desire. As his thighs rubbed against each other, a soft sound could be heard. His hands gripped the sheets tightly. This, Li Xiqing suddenly understood. He thought that she was having a fever, but now it seemed that she was going to lose one of her syllables. But, how could it be? A white light flashed in his mind, and Li Xiqing suddenly realized that there was something wrong with that bowl of bird's nest. But Lu Sa said it was sent by Grandpa. Could it be? Li Xiqing was speechless and thought to himself, how disrespectful. Seeing that he was not moving, she got up and grabbed the corner of his robe. However, she seemed to realize that she should not do that, so she immediately let go of his robe. Burrowing into the sheets, she covered her head and curled up into a ball. Knowing that she was not having a fever, Li Xiqing was not in a hurry. Slowly turning off the light, he opened his robe and lay down next to her, motionless. Chapter 343. Su Qianxi felt even more uncomfortable. He was under the blanket, so close. Why did he have to run so far away? Closer, closer. Feeling wronged, Su Qianxi suddenly threw off the blanket and let the cold air hit her. However, in less than 2 minutes, she was so sad that she wanted to cry. Sobbing, she said, "It's so hot." Li Xiqing glanced at her and said quietly, "If it's hot, take it off." Take it off. She also wanted to take it off, but, was it really okay to take it off next to him, in front of him? Would he think that she was trying to seduce him? However, it was really uncomfortable. "I'm sleeping. I won't look at you," he said, turning his back to her. She struggled for a moment, got up, and took off her dress. After that, he could not stay calm anymore. Resisting the desire to turn around and take a look, all he could think about was her body. She was definitely not wearing it. Su Qianxi had taken off her dress, but it was still so hot, so, so hot. Her mouth was dry, and her body wriggled restlessly. Burrowing into the quilt, she trembled with the quilt covering her body. Li Xiqing pretended to turn around unintentionally, and his hand fell on her with a snap. She shivered and couldn't help moaning. Li Xiqing's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly took his hand back. Gritting her teeth, she tried to hold it in for a few minutes. Finally, she couldn't help it and whispered, "Mr. Li, yes? I feel so bad, yes, the fever is bad, but it will be fine if you can bear it." She stopped talking, curled up, and sobbed in a low voice. Li Xiqing was going crazy and almost roared, "Why are you crying? Beg me, beg me. Beg me, and I will give it to you." However, she did not say anything. Even though his body was reacting, he did not want to move closer. However, in less than a minute, Su Qianxi's hot hand reached over. He caught her hand and asked in a low voice, "What?" Feeling relieved, she took her hand back and turned her back to him. Li Xiqing cursed inwardly. In the end, he couldn't help but reach out and touch her back. He asked seriously, "Where do you feel uncomfortable?" Su Qianxi shivered slightly and involuntarily leaned closer, not speaking. She really wasn't wearing anything. Suddenly feeling blood rushing to the top of his head, Li Xiqing endured the pain. He moved his hand and put it on her waist. "Here." She moaned, but soon gritted her teeth and did not say anything. Pretending not to hear her, Li Xiqing slid his hand down to her belly. "Or here." She couldn't stand it anymore and yelled, "Don't touch me." It was rare for Li Xiqing to be so obedient. He took his hand back and said, "Okay, then I'm going to sleep." Then she heard him turning over. Su Qianxi really wanted to slap herself. Feeling her body tremble because of him, it was so comfortable. She was even more dizzy, and her consciousness was blurred. Her hands wrapped around his back and touched his chest. Li Xiqing's lower body was aching. Feeling her initiative, he did not move. Su Qianxi's movements became bolder, and her hand reached down. Chapter 344. Su Qianxi did not get what she wanted. Feeling extremely weak, she whimpered, "I didn't." "Then what did you want to do?" Su Qianxi did not say anything and lowered her head guiltily. However, she reached out and put her leg on his. Taking her hand back, she climbed onto his back, put her arms around him, and put her lips on his. He tilted his head up, and she kissed nothing. Her fragrant lips fell on his Adam's apple. He felt even more restless. However, his eyes were as calm as if nothing had happened. Looking at her, he asked, "Don't you hate me? Why did you kiss me?" Su Qianxi felt a stab in her heart. Shaking her head, she mumbled, "No, I didn't." "Didn't what?" "I didn't hate you." "Then why did you hit me?" Why did she hit him? Su Qianxi pursed her lips and burst into tears. Li Xiqing's heart ached. Leaning closer, as if he was coaxing a little girl, he asked slowly, "Why?" "You're cheating on me." "You're a jerk." "When did I cheat?" Li Xiqing felt wronged. "You've always been the only one I've had." Su Qianxi's mind was a mess, and she could not hear him at all. Twisting uncomfortably, she begged, "So uncomfortable, so uncomfortable, Mr. Li." Li Xiqing also knew that she was upset. He reluctantly gave her a kiss and said sullenly, "Mrs. Li, please behave yourself." Su Qianxi did not listen to him. Wrapping her arms around him, she pressed her upper body against his. Her lips fell on his, mimicking what he had done to her, biting his lips awkwardly. Li Xiqing did not move, looking like he was at her mercy. However, Su Qianxi only kissed him and did not do anything else. Feeling anxious, he pushed her gently and asked, "Do you know how to do it or not?" Su Qianxi felt even more uncomfortable, looking at him with her wet eyes. Li Xiqing sighed, "I'm scared of you." Then he immediately took the initiative and pressed her down. Seizing her lips, Li Xiqing went straight in, his movements hot and wild. Holding her back with his big hand, she couldn't help letting out a moan as his rough hand stroked her white and tender skin. "Little slut." he said in a low voice, pushing his thighs apart as he lowered his waist and rubbed against her. Su Qianxi's body trembled, and she made an uncontrollable sound. However, the next second, she began to cry. Grabbing his back, she cried, "It's so uncomfortable. Go in, Mr. Li. Beg me. Please, I beg you, begging me? Where's your sincerity?" She wanted to kill him. Grabbing him, she asked, "What kind of sincerity do you want? I'll help you today, but you have to promise me one thing." Su Qianxi lifted her waist and put her legs on him, asking impatiently, "What?" "I'll tell you when I think of something." Li Xiqing moved forward, and Su Qianxi immediately moaned in satisfaction. However, he did not move. She felt even more uncomfortable and urged, "Hurry up. Promise me first." Chapter 345. The unexpected attack made all of Su Qianxi's words vanish in her mouth. He took her lips in his, feeling her scorching heat as she swayed with him. After the first time, Su Qianxi felt much better. After her body returned to normal, she felt a little sleepy. She was so tired that she did not even want to move a finger. Su Qianxi's eyelids drooped, somewhat resisting his touch. However, Li Xiqing said quietly, "You're going to throw me away? It's not that easy." As a result, Su Qianxi felt like her whole body was about to fall apart. Every time she resisted, it could only end in vain. She did not know how long the king-sized bed had been swaying. When it completely stopped, the sky outside the window had already begun to brighten. When she woke up the next day, it was already dawn. Opening her eyes, she saw the enlarged chest in front of her. The wheat-colored skin was delicate and smooth. Su Qianxi reached out her finger and pressed it. She clearly felt that the body in front of her was a little tense, and then a big hand reached over and grabbed her hand. Su Qianxi blinked and looked up at him. With a single glance, he saw a pair of deep, cold eyes. Vaguely, there was a sense of danger in them. Su Qianxi's hair stood on end, and she subconsciously shrank back, only to find that her feet were pressed down and a little numb. Li Xiqing moved his legs slightly, and Su Qianxi took the opportunity to pull away. She rolled back. However, before she could escape, a big hand gently grabbed her and pulled her back again. Su Qianxi's heart raced, and she nervously shrank her head and said, I'm going to wash up." Li Xiqing pursed his red lips into a line and looked down at her. After a long while, he sighed. Seeing this, Su Qianxi shrank her head even more, covered her body with the quilt, and blinked. Li Xiqing rarely sighed. In her eyes, he was almost indomitable and omnipotent. Could it be that he also encountered something that he could not solve? She saw Li Xiqing glanced at her with a look of disappointment on his face. He faintly said, "I can't believe it was you. What a loss." Hearing that, Su Qianxi blushed and retorted, "It was you." He was clearly the one who had been pestering her to. How did it become him who had suffered a great loss? She was the one who was at a disadvantage. However, before he finished, he was interrupted by Li Xiqing, who asked, "What about me? You were the one who seduced me last night." She blushed and frowned. She kicked him and yelled, "You're such a pervert." Li Xiqing's face turned red. Li Xiqing was kicked, but his expression did not change. He said seriously, "Did you forget that you were the one who pestered me last night, Mrs. Li?" Hearing that, Su Qianxi paused and stared at him with a blush. "You begged me, so I reluctantly helped you." Feeling embarrassed, she kicked him again. "Shut up." Li Xiqing's big hand under the quilt grabbed her ankle and slowly said, "In order to show your sincerity, you also promised me a condition. Do you still remember?" "I don't remember." Su Qianxi was angry. "I forgot." Chapter 346. Su Qianxi paused and retorted, "I was not wearing pants in the first place." "Oh." He nodded. "That's true. You could have just taken off your dress, Su Qianxi was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Angrily, she turned around and went to pick up her nightdress. However, Li Xiqing pulled her back and whispered in her ear, "Have you really forgotten what happened last night?" Of course, she remembered. It was still fresh in her memory. But how was she supposed to say it? How was she supposed to admit it? Blushing, she struggled and yelled, "Move! Don't hug me." "This is called hugging," he said, leaning closer to her until he was half on top of her, his big hands moving from top to bottom. "This is called hugging," he whispered. As he spoke, his large hand moved to touch her chest. He grasped it with one hand and gave it a gentle pinch. Su Qianxi struggled and was a bit annoyed. "Are you done? If I say I'm not done, can I continue?" Li Xiqing moved closer and kissed her lips from behind. Su Qianxi looked away, and Li Xiqing's kiss fell behind her ear. So, he decided to suck on her earlobe. Su Qianxi's body shivered, and her whole body became soft. Li Xiqing moved with his wet lips, lifted his legs, and whispered in her ear, "Look, you're craving me. Go away." Su Qianxi was furious. "Mr. Li, I never realized you were so shameless." "Mrs. Li, it's not too late to realize it now." "Mr. Li, Mrs. Li," because of Li Xiqing's interference, it had become the most intimate form of address. The words, "Mrs. Li," coming from his mouth made her heart beat faster than the word, "wife." However, this man was not destined to belong to her. Su Qianxi's heart ached. She looked away and said in a hoarse voice, "Are you this shameless in Tang Menjing's bed?" Tang Menjing's bed? Li Xiqing chewed on the words carefully. Each word was simple, but when put together, why did it sound so harsh? With tears in her eyes, she elbowed him and struggled to get out of bed. However, Li Xiqing held her firmly and moved closer to her. In a dangerous voice, he asked, "Do you think I have something to do with Tang Menjing?" Hearing that, Su Qianxi felt it was ironic and turned her head. Li Xiqing clearly saw that the pair of dark eyes were full of sarcasm, disdain, and strange contempt. Narrowing his eyes dangerously, Li Xiqing was a bit displeased. Tightening his arms around her, he turned her over and pressed her flat on top of him. "What do you mean by this?" "You know what I mean, don't you, Mr. Li?" Su Qianxi's heart raced. The scratches and hickeys on his chest clearly showed her craziness last night. However, it was only last night. Looking away, Su Qianxi did not want to look at him. With her eyes red, she struggled again and pretended to be indifferent. "Get off me. Explain it to me. Do you still think Tang Menjing's baby is mine?" Chapter 347. Li Xiqing's eyes became colder. Narrowing his eyes, he looked dangerous as he asked slowly, "So, you slapped me for no reason that day because of this?" Su Qianxi looked away and did not speak. However, her breathing was a bit fast. Her eyes were slightly red, and there was a layer of moisture in her dark eyes. "Mrs. Li, you are doubting my character." His voice was a bit low, and his anger was obvious. Su Qianxi curled her lips coldly, but did not look at him. "I thought I made it very clear last time. I have nothing to do with her. Not to mention sleeping with her, even touching her would make me feel disgusted." "Enough." Su Qianxi interrupted him. "I do not want to hear this. Mr. Li, can you please leave?" Li Xiqing pursed his lips and did not move. His voice was still low and mellow, but with clear frustration. "Why don't you believe me?" Su Qianxi pursed her lips and looked up at him. Clearly seeing the hurt in his eyes, she felt suffocated. Looking up at the ceiling, she said in a calm voice, "From the moment I found out that you lied to me, your credibility with me has been overdrawn." Li Xiqing's pupils contracted, and his eyes narrowed. Lied to her? The first thing he thought of was the wound on his right arm. Subconsciously, he looked sideways. Su Qianxi clearly noticed his movement and looked at his wound. It was a very long one, and it seemed to be a bit deep. Some of the scabs had fallen off, revealing a bit of pink skin. It was very ugly, which ruined the beauty. It looked out of place under his healthy, wheat-colored skin. More than half a month ago, Rong Roy cut it. Half a month, that is, when he was on a business trip? I did not tell you because I did not want you to worry, so I lied to you that I was on a business trip and would come back to see you when the wound was better. Was that so? Su Qianxi suddenly felt a bit sad. Did she look so gullible? He must not have known that she saw him walk out of Tang Menjing's house with her own eyes. Soon after, Su Qianxi checked and found that the house had been transferred to Tang Menjing. A villa worth tens of millions was easily transferred to another woman. If there was no dirty transaction, who would believe it? Moreover, a genuine paternity test was enough to prove everything. Putting everything together, he was still delusional enough to think that she would continue to be deceived. Su Qianxi's eyelashes fluttered, and she said quietly, "Well, get up. You're making me numb." Li Xiqing pursed his lips. Her cold eyes seemed to have shot him in the chest, leaving a bloody hole with blood gushing out. Her expression told him that she did not believe it. His injuries were right there, the severity was obvious, but why did she still not believe him? Was it really as she said? His credit rating had already been overdrawn? I didn't do it on purpose. It's okay. Get up. It won't be numb after a while. I was talking about the business trip. He did not mean to lie to her. If he knew that she would know, if he knew that she would misunderstand, he would rather let her worry and be in pain with him than see this. Su Qianxi paused, narrowed her eyes, and said quietly, "It doesn't matter. Everyone has their own private life. From the beginning. I have written it clearly in the contract that we will not interfere in each other's private lives. You don't have to explain to me." She was thinking too much. Chapter 348. Su Qianxi. Li Xiqing was a bit annoyed and grabbed her chin. "Don't talk about the contract. I will tear it up in a second." "You should." Su Qianxi said sarcastically, "The contract also says that we should keep our distance. Look at us now. We have already violated the contract. That thing should not exist." Li Xiqing regretted signing the contract. Gazing at her, he said word by word, "Forget about the contract. Tear it up and start over. You can tear it up. Anyway, what you have is just a copy. The original is with Xing Shiming." He tightened his grip on her chin as if he was going to crush her. He said in a deep voice, "Then we will ask Xing Shiming for it." "It's useless, Li Xiqing." Su Qianxi looked at him and suddenly put her arms around his neck, pulling him close to her. She whispered, "Isn't that what you want? When the contract time is up, Tang Menjing's child will be born. At that time, it will be the same with or without me, right? Tang Menjing, Tang Menjing. Tang Menjing again." Su Qianxi raised her head, kissed his Adam's apple, and slightly opened her mouth. Li Xiqing's body slightly stiffened. Holding her tighter, he breathed faster. Su Qianxi's soft hand slowly moved down, and her voice was seductive as she said slowly, "While we are still legally married, and Tang Menjing is pregnant, the most important thing is to have fun, isn't it?" All of Li Xiqing's feelings instantly collapsed. Grabbing her hand, he gritted his teeth and said, "Don't mention that name. It makes me sick." She also made him sick. Especially sick. "Stop pretending. You obviously like it a lot." Su Qianxi slightly twisted her body and put her legs on his, saying sarcastically, "Or do you feel guilty for lying in another woman's bed while she gives birth to your child?" "Huh?" Li Xiqing noticed her provocation and suddenly sneered. Su Qianxi felt a bit scared and paused. She subconsciously wanted to take her hand back, but he stopped her. He lowered his head and bit her collarbone. She gasped in pain and yelled, "It hurts." However, he did not intend to stop. Instead, he bit her even harder. "What are you doing?" She was almost in tears. "Are you a dog? Go away. To wake you up." Li Xiqing said breathlessly, then got out of bed. Su Qianxi watched him open the closet naked and take out a stack of things from the bottom drawer of the closet. Soon, he stood up and threw her 2 red booklets. Marriage certificate. Opening one of the booklets, Li Xiqing knelt down and grabbed her face, looking at the photo on the marriage certificate. Feeling the pain, Su Qianxi subconsciously wanted to dodge. However, Li Xiqing's actions were extremely domineering. He put the marriage certificate in front of her and growled, "Look carefully. The person on it is you, Su Qianxi, not that Tang guy." Su Qianxi's face was hurting, and she was about to cry, but she gritted her teeth and did not make a sound. "Don't try to push me to another woman. I said she has nothing to do with me. Her due date is in March next year. Give me some more time, okay?" Chapter 349. Hearing that, Su Qianxi looked away and did not speak. Her eyes were full of tears, but they did not fall. He gazed at her deeply, let go of her, and said slowly, "Do you remember that you still owe me a favor last night?" "I remember it now." Su Qianxi finally looked over. "Cancel the divorce contract." Cancel, cancel, the 2 simple words were like an echo, echoing in Su Qianxi's mind. Canceling it at this time undoubtedly meant that he wanted to stop her from thinking about divorce. If it was cancelled at this time, would they not get divorced? Would she be able to continue to be his wife? Li Xiqing clearly saw the emotion in her eyes. Sure enough, she did not want a divorce, right? Scenes suddenly appeared in Li Xiqing's mind, the way she looked when they just got married. Her love for him, her complicated feelings for him, and her fear of him were all clear. Now, what was going on? Her eyes were full of sarcasm and disdain, as well as hatred and disgust. When he found that her love was gone, he was at a loss of what to do. He still did not know what he had done wrong. However, he did not want to let go, did not want to divorce. Covering her face with his slightly rough hand, Li Xiqing gently rubbed it with his thumb and whispered, "Cancel the divorce contract and let's start over, okay?" He was serious. Li Xiqing's eyes did not contain any impurities. They were so dark and pure that it made her heart flutter. However, could she? No. Su Qianxi reached out and wiped her eyes. Her eyes flashed, she looked at him and sneered, "Do you really think I am stupid?" The divorce contract was the only thing that she had the upper hand in at the moment. If he couldn't even take the initiative, then what awaited him would be the real torture. What if he wanted to coax her to cancel the divorce contract and then force her to divorce directly? She knew very well how despicable this man was. She did not want to believe him. Never again. Hearing that, Li Xiqing slightly tightened his grip on her hand. He had never lowered himself to please a woman in this way. He was as low as the bottom of the dust, but what he got in return was a sneer from her. His eyes were as dark as ink, and the anger of humiliation was burning fiercely. Su Qianxi. She gritted her teeth, squeezing every word out. Her heart trembling, she flinched, but she still stiffened her neck, looked at him, and sneered fearlessly. "Are you angry?" Li Xiqing's hand on her face started to pinch her cheeks, which made her frown in pain. "I really want to strangle you," Li Xiqing said word by word. "Choke her to death. Out of sight, out of mind." However, he was reluctant to do so. Gritting her teeth, she looked at him stubbornly. He closed his eyes and pushed her away. Throwing the red booklet on the floor, he got out of bed and walked into the bathroom. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. She collapsed on the bed and let out a long sigh of relief. What she was most afraid of was how he looked when he lost his temper. No matter in her previous lifetime or this lifetime. Chapter 350. On her collarbone, there was a row of teeth marks. Feeling it with her fingers, Su Qianxi felt a bit of pain. He had bitten her so hard. After the shower, she wrapped herself in a towel and put on a thin turtleneck sweater. It was rare for her to put on a pair of pants and tie her hair into a ponytail. When she walked out of the door, it was already past 11 a.m. She saw Li Siqing walking out of Grandpa's room. Seeing Su Qianxi's new outfit, Li Siqing's eyes froze for a second and quickly looked away, walking toward the door. Su Qianxi stopped in the same place, watching him pass by her, and her mood was surprisingly peaceful. When Li Siqing walked out of the living room, his phone rang. Su Qianxi keenly noticed that he seemed to have changed his phone. This was not the model he had used before. He answered the call and walked out. Su Qianxi followed him, holding her bag and keeping a certain distance from him. She did not know what was said on the other side of the phone, but Su Qianxi noticed that Li Siqing's mood did not seem to be right. He said, "You must protect it." He drove away, not intending to take Su Qianxi with him. Su Qianxi did not want to get in his car at all. She stopped a taxi and gave the driver Song Yifan's address. However, she always felt something was not right. What did he mean by protect just now? Tang Menjing's child? Feeling a pain in her heart, Su Qianxi thought it over and over again and said, "Sir, to Jiangzhou." The driver looked a bit impatient. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" It was completely the opposite direction. Although dissatisfied, he still turned around and drove toward the Jiangzhou villas. When the car was near the Jiangzhou villas, Su Qianxi immediately saw the low-key, luxurious black Maybach. She had expected it, but she was still disappointed. The last bit of hope in her heart had completely disappeared. Reality was like a stepmother, giving her 2 fiery slaps in the face. It was really interesting to lie to her, wasn't it? Su Qianxi's eyes were cold, and her heart was cold. "Let's go back to Yifeng Pavilion." Laurel was anxious. No one had expected that Tang Menjing would hit the wall with her stomach. With such a collision, the 30 to 40 people in the villa were all in a mess. However, Laurel was someone who had experienced great storms. In Star City, he had seen much more storms than this. He sent her back to her room, called the doctor, and then called Li Siqing. Tang Menjing thought that they would send her to the hospital no matter what. In this way, the child could be aborted, and she could go out and ask for help, telling others that she was imprisoned. However, she had never expected that he would be so considerate as to hire several doctors and set up an emergency room in his home. Seeing a dozen pairs of eyes staring at her, Tang Menjing felt she was going crazy. For a whole half a month, she had no freedom at all. He was watched when he went to the toilet, when he bathed, and when he ate. He was even worse than a prisoner. Other than Moon Osmanthus, the others were all mute. No one was there to talk to her, and she could not make any phone calls. In addition, the place was remote, so there was no one to help her. Everyone was glad that the child was saved. But for Tang Menjing, it was the worst news. Chapter 351. After returning from the old house, Su Qianxi devoted herself to her studies and work, so she was very busy. Lu Yihan's business skills were getting better and better. In just over a month, he had officially launched the Qianlu software, and the number of downloads and users was very high. As a shareholder, Su Qianxi had also received a very good income. The weather was getting colder and colder, and Su Qianxi was wearing more and more clothes. The winter solstice was a day of reunion. Song Yifan was still in London and could not return to China to reunite with her. However, the old house called her early and asked her to go to the old house for the holiday. It was raining heavily, and the winter solstice was destined to be wet. Su Qianxi drove her new white car and was stuck on the highway. Looking at the time, it was already past 2 p.m. She did not know what was going on in front of her, but the traffic was still. The sound of horns kept ringing, annoying her. Her phone rang, and it was from the old house. Su Qianxi picked up the phone and said, "Hello. Madam, are you here yet?" "Not yet. Today is the winter solstice, and the traffic is stuck." Su Qianxi glanced out of the window. It was still raining heavily. "Oh, are you with the second young master?" The old man said he wanted to eat the meat that the second young master bought before. "What meat?" "I don't know." The old man can't tell. "Anyway, it's delicious. The second young master knows. You can call him and ask. Let her call? Su Qianxi pursed her lips and said, Lu Sa, please call him. It's not convenient for me right now. Oh, I've tried, but I don't know what's going on. I can't get through to him. I'm very busy now. Grandpa is playing with Mr. Air and the others. I have to follow him to finish up. Someone seemed to be calling Lu Sa. Lu Sa responded loudly, Oh, I'll be right there. Then she said to Su Qianxi again, Thank you. If you can't get through, let me call the second young master after I'm done. I'm just afraid that the old man might be anxious. Okay, Su Qianxi agreed. Go ahead. I'll call him. Okay, thanks. Remember to come back early. Mr. Air's family is here too. Okay. She hung up the phone, and the road was still blocked. Looking through the address book, she found that the number was nowhere to be found. She had to click on the keyboard and press the number. Her movements were so smooth that there was no pause. After dialing it out, she suddenly realized that she had finished dialing it. She had remembered this number for 2 lifetimes. The line was busy. I really couldn't get through. The car in front finally moved slowly. Su Qianxi started the car and called Qingyu. Qingyu quickly answered the phone, and Su Qianxi learned that Qingyu had returned to her hometown for the holiday. It's only 3:00 now. He must still be in the company. Why don't you go to the company to look for him? Thank you. If boss sees you go to him, he'll definitely be very happy. Su Qianxi curled her lips and said self-deprecatingly, Really? Of course. You don't know, but boss has been in a terrible mood recently. He's been working overtime every day. Everyone in the company is so scared that they don't dare to make a sound. They're afraid that they'll offend him if they say anything wrong. Even I have to apply for annual leave to go home. From the looks of it, it was indeed very bad. Was it because of her? If he saw her, would he feel even worse? Wan Lily, everyone who is scolding her, please put yourself in her shoes. Your husband is pregnant with someone else, and the blood test is also there. The evidence is conclusive. Several times when you decided to believe him, you found that he was lying to you. Twice when you saw him with the mistress, you would happily say, Oh, I believe you, I love you. Would it? To be honest, only Su Qianxi would do that. If I had a bad temper, I would definitely find someone to beat up my husband and the mistress, and then sue him until he left the family with nothing. You have the god's perspective, of course, you know everything, but Qianqian doesn't. So, how can you say that she is pretentious? How can you say that she doesn't believe Mr. Li? Mr. Li's EQ is low, and Su Qianxi feels inferior. All of you can see that. My character has been set from the beginning, and I will not change it. Chapter 352. Ahem. Qingyu found that she seemed to be talking too much. If Li Xiqing found out that she had sold him out, he would definitely exploit her. Well, madam, don't say these things to him. Just keep it between us. Su Qianxi smiled. Okay, goodbye. Goodbye. Hanging up the phone, she took a long breath. Madam, in her previous lifetime, Qingyu had always called her madam. After the divorce, she called her Miss Su. Madam seemed to be a good name. She drove off the highway. Coincidentally, the road she was on was very close to Li Xiqing's company. Following her memory, she drove to Li Xiqing's company. In less than 2 minutes, she saw the building with a unique shape. The Li Group was also one of the landmarks in Kingstown. Su Qianxi stopped the car and walked in. The receptionist recognized her at a glance and said, Madam. Although it was the first time that Su Qianxi had come to Li Xiqing's company, her name and appearance could be recognized by everyone in Kingstown. Su Qianxi smiled and asked, I am looking for Li Xiqing. The president is in the conference room on the top floor. You can go directly to the special elevator here. Thank you. Su Qianxi went directly to the top floor and was very familiar with the layout. In her previous lifetime, she had been here many times. Walking in easily, the people in the secretary's office were slightly surprised to see her. However, they all knew who she was. They hurriedly took her to Li Xiqing's office and gave her the best coffee. "Boss is in a meeting. Do you want me to go inform him?" a secretary said. "There's no need. I'll wait here for a while. You go ahead with your work." "Thank you." "You are welcome. I will go first." "Thank you." The secretary looked at her and was so excited that her face was flushed. Before the door was completely closed, the secretary screamed, "She is so beautiful." Su Qianxi curled her lips and took a sip of the coffee. She felt inexplicably nervous. When he came over later and saw her, would he be surprised? Would he be surprised? What should she say? "Long time no see. Hello?" It seemed a bit strange, her heart racing. She suddenly regretted listening to Qing Yu and coming here to find him. Would he think that she was here to express her goodwill to him, so she purposely came to see him? However, she only came to his company because she couldn't get through to her grandfather's phone. If he misunderstood, it would be very awkward, right? Was it too late to leave now? She was a bit hesitant. After some consideration, she stood up and walked to the door of the office. However, as soon as she walked in, the door was suddenly opened. She was caught off guard and hit by the doorknob. "Ah!" Su Qianxi screamed and squatted down, covering where she was hit. There was obvious astonishment in Li Xiqing's eyes. Looking at the petite figure squatting and groaning on the ground, he thought he was hallucinating. However, when she looked up at him, his heart was hit hard. It really was her. Su Qianxi clearly felt Li Xiqing's cold gaze on her. Blushing, she covered her lower abdomen and did not dare to get up. Pain, pain, pain. Of all places to hit, she hit the bone there. A disease called embarrassment instantly broke out, and no medicine could cure it. Seeing her painful face, Li Xiqing resisted the urge to check where she was hurting and whispered, "What's wrong?" Chapter 353. Li Xiqing's cold face suddenly cracked. "You do?" Su Qianxi's face became even redder. She stood up and said in pain, "Why didn't you knock before coming in?" "It hurts." This action was a bit obscene, and Li Xiqing couldn't help but look at it. He said calmly, "This is my office." Su Qianxi was suddenly speechless. Feeling his gaze, she immediately turned around and rubbed her wound with her coat. Li Xiqing was speechless and said in a low voice, "Mind your image." Then he closed the door and walked to the desk. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you," Su Qianxi said matter-of-factly. "Grandpa said he wanted to eat the meat you bought for him last time, but he couldn't get through. Lu Sa asked me to find you and take it back." Su Qianxi said matter-of-factly, but she soon realized something was wrong. Li Xiqing glanced at the phone on the desk. There were more than 30 missed calls. Picking up the phone, he found that most of them were business calls. Only 3 of them were from the old house and her. Picking up the phone, Li Xiqing said quietly, "Got it." "Okay." His attitude made Su Qianxi feel a bit disappointed. She stood up and felt that it was not very painful anymore. Picking up her bag on the sofa, she said, "Then I'll go." "Sit down." Li Xiqing did not look up. "Let's go together later." "No, I have my own car." However, Li Xiqing had already walked over and pressed her down again. Su Qianxi wanted to say something, but she saw him make a gesture to keep quiet. Then, he said in fluent English, "So busy." After the meeting, he had to return calls. Su Qianxi wanted to get up but was held down by his hand. Her heart fluttered. Did he want to make her stay? With this idea, Su Qianxi felt a bit restless. Sitting on the sofa, she pretended to be calm. When he finished the call, it was already more than 10 minutes later. Su Qianxi looked at him and asked, "Why don't you let me go?" Looking at her with his deep eyes, Li Xiqing's expression was a bit cold. It's a holiday. Let Grandpa be happy. Su Qianxi felt her heart was soaked with vinegar, feeling a bit disappointed. Oh. So that was it. Indeed, Grandpa was already so old, and he couldn't bear to see his children and grandchildren quarrel. Grandpa knew that she had been in a cold war with him for more than a month. Suddenly, an inexplicable possibility popped up in his mind. Did Grandpa do it on purpose today? Li Xiqing glanced at her and picked up her bag. Let's go. He was already out of the door, and she followed him. Clearly aware of the envious eyes of the secretaries, she gradually slowed down. Wouldn't he be unhappy? In his previous life, he hated it the most when she walked around him ostentatiously. Given their current situation, would they? Thinking of that, she had slowed down a lot, watching him walk fast, deliberately keeping a distance from him. Li Xiqing pressed the elevator button and found that she was not behind him. Chapter 354. At the moment when the elevator door closed, Su Qianxi heard a voice. This is so happy. The elevator door closed, cutting off all the sound. Su Qianxi sighed. It turned out that in their eyes, she was also happy. However, why could she not feel it herself? Instead, she was full of sadness. Where's your car? The sudden voice made Su Qianxi a bit dazed, but she quickly reacted and replied, at the door. Li Xiqing heard that and pressed the first floor button. Silence. The elevator was so quiet. The only thing he could hear was the sound of the elevator descending. Ding. When the elevator reached the first floor, Li Xiqing walked out first, followed by Su Qianxi. Many people looked at them. Su Qianxi was a bit nervous, following Li Xiqing with her head slightly lowered. Suddenly, Li Xiqing stopped, and Su Qianxi did not stop and bumped into him. Ouch! Su Qianxi covered her nose, and the soreness made her tear up. Looking up, her eyes were full of accusation. Li Xiqing glanced at her casually and took an umbrella from the umbrella rack on the side. A big umbrella. When she arrived, the rain was much lighter. The car was parked at the door. She had just run in without an umbrella. But now, the rain had resumed, and the road was flooded with water. People were in a hurry. Just as she was about to reach for an umbrella, he grabbed her hand and pulled her forward without any explanation. Hey, wait. Su Qianxi was almost carried under his arm, and her feet were a bit unsteady in her high heels. Li Xiqing did not listen and dragged her forward. After opening the big umbrella, he put his arm around her neck and walked to her car. Su Qianxi was a bit dazed. How did he know that this car was hers? He should have never seen it. They had not seen each other for so long. Open the door. Li Xiqing glanced at her. It's raining hard. It's cold. She quickly unlocked the door. Li Xiqing opened the driver's door but did not get in. Instead, he looked at her. Su Qianxi immediately understood and got in. Closing the door, he went to the passenger seat and sat down. However, as soon as he sat down, his eyebrows furrowed and he said with dissatisfaction, "Why is it so small? How can it be compared to yours?" She muttered and slowly started the car. "I'll get you a bigger one later. I like small ones." The rain was so heavy that she could not see clearly, so she turned on the headlights. "I'm not feeling well." Li Xiqing looked disgusted. "It's fine as long as I like it. Why do you care so much? I thought you were used to my big ones." When she was about to argue, she suddenly thought of something. Blushing, she glared at him and yelled, "Li Xiqing, you pervert." Li Xiqing raised an eyebrow and looked at her with some confusion. "I was talking about the size of the car. What are you thinking about?" She paused and blushed even more. Clearly seeing the mockery in his eyes, she angrily smashed the steering wheel and turned around. Li Xiqing slowly fastened the seat belt and said slowly, "Don't you think it's better to have a big one?" Her hands trembling, she roared, "Can you shut up?" Dash. Chapter 355. Li Xiqing's lips curled up. His mood, which had been tense for more than a month, was miraculously relieved. Su Qianxi did not want to talk to him and drove steadily. However, in the end, she couldn't help asking, "Where is the store?" "Surely Mingdu." Su Qianxi was dazed and looked at him. "Isn't it in the back?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you tell me earlier?" "You didn't ask." Su Qianxi gritted her teeth, wishing she could throw him out of the car. However, she still turned the steering wheel and headed for Shirley Mingdu. "Turn right and get out," he said quietly. Su Qianxi found a place to park the car. The rain was still pouring. He picked up the umbrella and opened the door. "Sit." Su Qianxi blinked. Did he want to pick her up? Did he think she would not have an umbrella in the car? Su Qianxi pouted and got out of the car with an umbrella after he got out. The pink umbrella had a couple kissing on it, full of teenage girls' hearts. Su Qianxi locked the car and walked forward with the umbrella. Li Xiqing's eyes became more and more serious. He stopped and said slowly, "It's a bit far. Follow me." "Okay." It was indeed a bit far. About 20 minutes later, the rain gradually subsided, and they turned into a deep alley. It was very clean. Although the alley was small, the decoration style inside was no worse than those outside Shirley Mingdu. It was the first time that Su Qianxi had been here, and she was a bit surprised. "I didn't expect it to be so beautiful." He closed the umbrella and walked into a store. The eye-catching century-old brand was very eye-catching. Su Qianxi was drooling when she walked in and saw a dazzling array of dried meat and snacks. The history and origin of the store were written on the wall, which Su Qianxi read with great interest. Li Xiqing ordered a few flavors and glanced at her. Then his eyes fell on the umbrella she put at the door. After reading the history of the store, Su Qianxi wandered around the shelves. When he came to call her, he was already carrying 2 full bags. "Let's go." "Okay." The rain became heavier again. The rain poured down in torrents, but the puddles on the road were much better than before. It was not to the extent that they could not walk. Su Qian picked up the foldable umbrella at the door and was stunned. Because she thought it would not take long to buy things, she did not put the umbrella back. However, when she picked it up, she only lifted one part of the umbrella. Looking at the umbrella in her hand and the umbrella on the ground, she stomped her foot in anger. "What the hell, who did this? Damn it." Li Xiqing stood behind her and said coldly, "You must have stepped on it accidentally. Look at the footprint." There was a black footprint on the surface of the umbrella, dripping with water. Looking at the footprint, Su Qianxi was heartbroken. This umbrella was newly bought, and he especially liked the pattern on it. This was his first time using it, but it was destroyed just like that. Su Qianxi's face scrunched up in anger. Li Xiqing glanced at her and said calmly, "It's just an umbrella. It doesn't matter if it breaks. But the rain is so heavy. Without an umbrella, I will be wet. I have one." He picked up the big black umbrella that was dripping water. "Let's go." What the hell, he was going to share an umbrella with her? Su Qianxi opened her mouth and mumbled, "In such a heavy rain, 2 people sharing an umbrella will definitely get wet." Chapter 356. Elopement. Su Qianxi blushed. "I just said wet. I also said wet bends. Is that wrong?" He looked at her seriously. Su Qianxi blushed even more. Did he just say elopement or wet? Although Southerners might not pronounce private and wet, Li Xiqing had taken an advanced Mandarin test. In order to follow him, she had taken the test in her previous lifetime as well. Could it be that she had misheard? "Let's go." He handed the 2 bags of food to her. "Protect them." Su Qianxi took them and held them in her arms. Li Xiqing was wearing a dark gray coat with a straight suit underneath. After opening the umbrella, he took her waist with his coat. Su Qianxi's body stiffened and she struggled. "What are you doing? going home. Li Xiqing's warm breath was on her ear. Su Qianxi felt her face was burning. He said in a low voice, "Protect the food. Don't let Grandpa wait." So, she protected the food, and he protected her? Thinking of this, Su Qianxi's heart raced. He took her down the stairs. Seeing her pink ears, Li Xiqing's cold eyes became softer, and he wrapped his coat tighter around her. On the way, no one spoke. Su Qianxi felt warm all over. Holding the food tightly in her arms, she was surprised that no water splashed on her. When they returned to the car, Su Qianxi found that Li Xiqing's back was soaked. Seeing him take off his coat, Su Qianxi moved her lips but did not say anything. Glancing at her well-protected body and the food, she felt warm. They did not speak on the way. When they arrived at the old house, it was almost 6 p.m. Li Xiqing went to the room to change, and Su Qianxi gave the newly bought jerky to Grandpa. Captain Li was very happy, looking at her with a satisfied smile. Su Qianxi felt a bit embarrassed and went to the kitchen to help Lu Sa make glutinous rice balls. Lu Sa wrapped the dough with stuffing, sesame, peanuts, quicksand. Su Qianxi was responsible for throwing the glutinous rice balls into the pot and scooping them out after they were cooked. When Lu Sa brought over the last bowl of glutinous rice balls, she came over and asked mysteriously, "Did you make up?" Su Qianxi paused. Seeing the mischievous smile on Lu Sa's face, she immediately thought of the phone call she just had and nodded. Sort of. At the very least, their relationship had broken the ice, hadn't it? Finally, the clouds have parted to see the moon. Recently, the old man has been worried to death. Sigh. That's good. I think the old man will let you stay for the night. I've already prepared clothes for you. Thank you, Lu Sa. Don't stand on ceremony. Hey, it's cooked. Hurry up and scoop it up. Don't break it. Su Qianxi looked at the dumplings in the pot and quickly scooped them up with a colander. He distributed the glutinous rice balls according to their heads, but before he could take them out, he heard a commotion outside. It sounded like they were quarreling. She was shocked and ran out of the kitchen. She immediately saw Mrs. Tang yelling at Li Xiqing like a shrew, "Li Xiqing, you bastard, give my daughter back. Where did you hide her?" Mrs. Tang looked a bit agitated. With red eyes, she looked at Li Xiqing as if he was her enemy. Li Xiqing sat on the sofa with his legs crossed, looking cold and noble. He looked at her and said, "Mrs. Tang, what do you mean? Wan Lily, here comes the troublemaker. How do you want Tang Menjing to die? P.S. Today, I learned that browsers also have reading channels. I heard that there are a lot of readers on the browser. Don't move." Chapter 357. What a cunning guy. She should have known that, given the boy's character, even if he really liked Tang Menjing, he would never compromise under their threat. At the time, she did not think much about it. Later, she found that Tang Menjing had not been home for more than 2 months and could not get through to her. Although she had texted and chatted with her, Tang Menjing had not even sent a voice message. Other than telling them that Li Xiqing had given her a villa, she had not heard from her again. Mrs. Tang suddenly realized that Li Xiqing was fooling them. He was so anxious that he immediately rushed over in a hurry. Seeing Li Xiqing's calm look, Mrs. Tang trembled with anger and yelled, "Stop pretending. Where did you hide her?" Her voice was sharp and hysterical. "You'd better give my daughter back, or I will sue you." "Sue me?" Li Xiqing crossed his arms and did not panic at all. Sitting on the sofa, he was extremely calm. "Sue me for what? Where is the evidence?" Mrs. Tang paused and immediately yelled, "Do I even need evidence? My daughter was taken away by you. She has not contacted us for such a long time. You must have locked her up. Let me tell you, this is illegal imprisonment. Mrs. Tang, there must be evidence for everything. You have no evidence. We can sue you for slander." Li Beixing walked out, followed by Li Xiao and his wife. Seeing Qin Shuhua, Mrs. Tang's eyes became even redder. She cried, "My poor daughter. She gave birth to a child for such a man and is locked up. She can't even see her mother on this holiday. This is so miserable. This family will die a horrible death. Oh my God." Li Zhao's brother, Li Sheng, and his family were all in the backyard. There was some distance between the living room and the backyard, but Mrs. Tang was so loud that Li Weiya heard the noise and ran out. Hearing the noise, old Master Li also walked out with his walking stick. He stomped his walking stick on the ground and said angrily, "Why is it you again? I told you, the Li family no longer allows people from the Tang family to come." Mrs. Tang cried even more hysterically and yelled, "Your whole family is a bunch of bastards. My daughter gave birth to a child for the Li family with a big belly. You heartless family, you just watched your little bastard lock our daughter up. There's no justice and no law." Her voice was very noisy. Li Beixing's lips twitched. He went forward and lifted Mrs. Tang up, saying, "Mrs. Tang, don't cry at a funeral on a holiday. What does it have to do with us that your daughter went missing? My daughter must have been locked up by your younger brother. If you don't believe me, you can ask him." He struggled violently and even bumped into Li Beixing. Li Beixing shrugged helplessly and looked at his younger brother. Li Xiqing remained calm and said, "I didn't. Please go back, Mrs. Tang." If Mrs. Tang did not know what kind of person Li Xiqing was, she might have been fooled by him. But she had always known that this kid was the most cunning and sinister. "I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Missing persons can be reported within 24 hours. Do you need help?" A young female voice came. She was tall and slim, looking delicate. Chapter 358. My man. Those 3 words made Li Xiqing, who had been calm for a long time, feel a strong emotion in his eyes. Turning his head, he saw Su Qianxi's gentle profile. She was smiling, her eyes full of sarcasm. Just like that day in bed, Li Xiqing's eyes darkened. He reached out and held her soft hand, feeling a bit cold. Su Qianxi glanced at him and then turned back to Mrs. Tang. She said in a calm voice, "Miss Tang is an adult. She has her own life and thoughts." Mrs. Tang was watching her daughter like this, and she lost her. "How can you accuse my husband of locking her up?" "Yes, her man, her husband." That was quite a smooth word. Li Xiqing tightened his grip on her hand, and his eyes lit up. "Little bitch, you are not a good person either. If it were not for you, Tang Menjing would not have ended up like this," Mrs. Tang cursed. "You are trespassing. If you don't leave, I will call the police." Su Qianxi took out her phone and waved it at her. "Go ahead, call the police." Su Qianxi's eyes became even colder. She dialed the 3 numbers. "Hello, this is Li's house, number 88 in XX district. My last name is Su, and there is someone." "Enough." Mrs. Tang roared. "You really dare to call the police? Wait and see." "You heard it. Not only did she trespass, she slandered me and my husband, and threatened me." Trembling with anger, Mrs. Tang was about to grab the phone from her. However, Li Beixing was right next to her. How could she be so arrogant? Li Beixing grabbed Mrs. Tang and dragged her out. "I'm sorry, Auntie Tang. Our family is going to celebrate the new year. You can call the police to find your daughter later." Mrs. Tang struggled and yelled, but she could not get rid of Li Beixing's strength. After throwing her out, Li Beixing closed the door and locked it. "There are all kinds of people these days," Li Beixing complained as soon as he walked in, but he found the atmosphere was not right. He was holding Su Qianxi's hand, but she did not look very happy. Li Beixing walked in and teased, "I didn't expect this, sister-in-law. How domineering." He called the police just like that. "But, will the police really come later?" "I won't." Su Qianxi's smile was a bit forced. She wanted to get rid of his hand, but he did not move. "Time to eat." I have something to say to you. Let's talk after dinner. I can't wait. Li Xiqing stood up and pulled her toward the room. Su Qianxi exclaimed and stumbled to keep up with him. Feeling the ambiguous looks from the elders and cousins around her, her heart was pounding, and she shrank her head. He dragged her into the room and closed the door behind him. What do you want to say? Before she finished, her words were drowned in her mouth. Her eyes widened, she subconsciously struggled. However, he put her hand down and deepened the kiss. She could clearly feel his joy and excitement. His initial struggle gradually softened. Beside his ears, she could hear his slightly hurried breathing. Chapter 359. Just when Su Qianxi thought she was about to suffocate, he let her go. Su Qianxi collapsed in his arms, panting. Do you know, I'm so happy. His deep voice and warm breath were all gently teasing the limp body. Su Qianxi felt a bit weak. Lying on him, she asked, what are you happy about? Li Xiqing did not speak again, but his dark eyes were full of excitement, shining brightly. Su Qianxi blushed under his naked gaze. She looked away and asked the question she wanted to ask, isn't Tang Menjing in your house in Jiangzhou? Li Xiqing's eyes flashed and he asked, how do you know? I saw. You went to see her. Went to see Tang Menjing? That was more than a month ago. Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes. All the things that he had been unable to figure out suddenly connected, and he suddenly felt enlightened. So, you sentenced me to death because of this? An oppressive aura was instantly emitted from his body, and it was cold and penetrating. Su Qianxi shrank her neck and felt guilty. She whispered, So, you quarreled with me and hit me because you saw me visiting Tang Menjing. Because of this, you think Tang Menjing's child is really mine, right? Yes, he guessed right. However, why did Su Qianxi feel so guilty when he said it all out? He was clearly in the wrong first, so why should she feel guilty? He made it sound like it was her fault. Su Qianxi raised her head, looked at him and said, isn't it? He gazed at her deeply, suddenly lowered his head and bit her neck. She frowned in pain and struggled with her hands, yelling, Li Xiqing, let go. Hearing that, he did ease up a bit, sucking her neck. The tip of his tongue gently swirled on the tender flesh, and she shivered. Her whole body was limp, and she collapsed. Li Xiqing lifted her up with his thigh and made her face him. He whispered, why are you thinking about it? I've said it many times, it wasn't me. I did lock Tang Menjing up. The villa in Jiangzhou has been transferred to her name to cover Tang Zhenghao's site. Otherwise, why do you think they only found out now that Tang Menjing is missing? As he spoke, he had already moved away from her neck and whispered to her face. Su Qianxi was tickled by his hot breath, and her breathing became more rapid. I locked her up because I wanted her to give birth to the child to prove my innocence. Amniocentesis requires absolute calmness and obedience of the pregnant woman. Tang Menjing reacted violently when she heard that and refused to take the amniotic fluid again. I cannot prove my innocence without a DNA test. That DNA test was forged by Rong Rui. He admitted it himself, but he didn't want to help me recover the original information. This is the only way. Only when Tang Menjing's child is born and my innocence is proven, can I convince the elders and you. When the time comes, I'll take you to Ireland, okay? He couldn't wait any longer. The surprise he had prepared for her was absolutely unprecedented and would never be repeated again. Chapter 360. Su Qianxi felt weak all over, her body trembling. Li Xiqing chuckled and kissed her earlobe. Shivering even more, she looked up and narrowed her eyes. Li Xiqing had a smile in his eyes. This woman was so sensitive. Going to Ireland. Wedding? Yes, wedding. Didn't you say? You forgot, I said it out of anger. Su Qianxi's eyes were red, and suddenly full of tears, they fell. Li Xiqing covered her face with his big hand and gently wiped away the tears. Don't cry. There are elders waiting for us outside for dinner. Su Qianxi pursed her lips and cried even harder. Is what you just said true? Why would I lie to you? I thought you loved Tang Menjing. Li Xiqing wiped away her tears and said unhappily, what you said is the biggest insult to yourself. Su Qianxi heard that and couldn't help laughing. Loving Tang Menjing was an insult to her? She had never realized that this guy was so good at talking before. Seeing her smile, Li Xiqing gently warned her after wiping away her tears, don't cry. Grandpa will scold me if he sees this. He looked at her pitifully. Su Qianxi's smile widened and she reached out to push him. Li Xiqing let her push him. With a rare smile, he poked her face. Why do you cry so much? No, she rarely cried in front of others. She just didn't know why she couldn't help it in front of him and unknowingly became a crybaby. Well, no. Pouting, she murmured, never. That's right. Looking up at his smiling eyes, she tugged at his sleeve and whispered, you really didn't do anything to Tang Menjing? No. Li Xiqing looked serious and said, if I had any feelings for her, it would have nothing to do with you now. Truth, the truth. Su Qianxi knew it, but she was still unhappy. Pushing him away, she opened the door and was about to go out. He put an arm around her neck and whispered, so, don't doubt me in the future. Your man is hurt. His low voice, with a bit of grievance and charm, made Su Qianxi's heart flutter. Your man, these 3 words sounded really good. Blushing, she tilted her head and whispered, are you flirting, Mr. Li? If Mrs. Li thinks so, then so be it. Their faces were so close that the tips of their noses were less than a centimeter apart. Looking at him, she suddenly bit his lips and said seriously, in the future, don't lie to me. Yes, I'm not lying. If I find out that you're lying to me, it'll be useless even if you act coquettishly. You lied to me once, I lied to you once. We're even now. Su Qianxi was dazed and thought of the time when Louis Han was discharged from the hospital. I was afraid that you would be angry. Hearing that, Li Xiqing mimicked her tone and whispered, I was afraid that you would worry. Su Qianxi was speechless. She pouted and took his hand away. Let's go. The elders are waiting for us. Okay. Li Xiqing held her hand and opened the door. They walked out side by side. As soon as they walked out, everyone in the living room looked at them. Hey, why is my cousin's mouth swollen? A child's voice rang, and everyone laughed. Chapter 361. Gratified, satisfied, shocked, and flirtatious, all kinds of gazes converged. The deer couldn't help blushing and gave him a glare. Aya, this little deer is too naughty. Li Beixing teased. Hurry up and bring your little deer over to eat. Li Xing's youngest son, Li Weiya's 5-year-old brother, heard that and looked left and right, asking, how come I don't see it? Where is the deer? The whole family couldn't help laughing. Li Xiqing walked up, rubbed his little head, and said with a straight face, that's mine. Don't even think about it. The little guy pouted and looked disgusted. Stingy second brother, I just want to see it. It's not like I can eat it. Humph, if you don't want to see it, then don't let me see it. I don't want to see it anyway. The whole family burst into laughter, and Su Qianxi blushed the most. Turning her head, she decided not to stay there and went to the kitchen to help Lu Sa set the dishes. This winter solstice reunion dinner was a happy one. Su Qianxi had never had such an atmosphere. There were family, lovers, and even her heart was warm. After dinner, Grandpa suggested that they spend the night here, and Li Xiqing directly agreed. Su Qianxi did not know about it until she helped Lu Sa clean up. Although she had expected it, she still felt a little shy after not being together for more than a month, and her face was unconsciously hot. She went out for a walk with Grandpa. When she came back, Li Xing's family had already left. Su Qianxi went back to her room and found Li Xiqing in a video conference. Seeing her come in, Li Xiqing just glanced at her and then continued to work. Su Qianxi rummaged through the closet, took out a set of pajamas, and then went straight to the bathroom. After coming out, Li Xiqing was still busy, so she took out the tablet from her bag, plugged in the headphones, and lay on the bed to watch a movie. It was an indie film that was popular some time ago, starring Deng Chao. When she saw the pig forcing a smile and wishing Swallow well, she couldn't help feeling sad. Swallow got in the car, and the pig finally couldn't help chasing after her, crying, "Swallow, how can I live without you?" Su Qianxi burst into tears and couldn't help crying. Suddenly, she felt his hot breath on her ear. Turning off the tablet, he whispered, "You can cry while watching a movie. Why do you like to cry so much?" Su Qianxi let him hold her down and reached for her tablet, shouting, "Give it back to me. I haven't finished reading yet." Li Xiqing unplugged her headphones and put the tablet on the bedside table. "Are the people in the movie better looking than me?" Su Qianxi did not get it, so she gave up. She sniffed and said sullenly, "You are different from them." "How is it different?" "You're not acting." Li Xiqing chuckled, got off her, went around to her, and lay down in the same position as her. She then found that he had taken a shower and was wearing a thin rabbit fur robe. "Mrs. Li, yes?" Su Qianxi also looked at him, her eyes still a little red. "Do you take medicine every time you do it with Mr. Li?" Su Qianxi was dazed, blushed, and shook her head. "No." After answering, she suddenly realized what he meant. Every time, he did not take any safety precautions, dash. Chapter 362. Subconsciously, she touched her belly and sat cross-legged. She blinked and said, "Is it a safe period every time?" Li Xiqing was lost in thought and began to count with his fingers. Su Qianxi blushed and patted his hand. "What are you talking about? You can remember when it was?" "That's not true." "Yes." Li Xiqing frowned. "We've only done it a few times. How can I not remember?" Then he sighed. "We've been married for so long, and we've only done it once, twice, 5 times. It would have been fine if he did not count." Now that he did, Li Xiqing felt wronged. Lifting his eyes, a pair of pitch-black and deep eyes landed on her. There was a strong hidden bitterness in them, and the light in his eyes deepened, revealing the attributes of a naked hungry wolf. She felt a bit scared and immediately shrank back. Li Xiqing was even faster. He grabbed her and pushed her onto the bed. The soft bed swayed with their intense movements. Then, Su Qianxi's lips were sealed. Li Xiqing's movements were very gentle, so gentle that Su Qianxi's heart softened. She felt so happy. Every time he kissed her, she had a beautiful illusion that he was with her, not for sex, but for love. The kiss deepened. Su Qianxi's breathing became more rapid. When he was about to do something else, she stopped and called, "Mr. Li, yes?" Li Xiqing liked this title more and more. In the past, he felt it was too strange, but now he thought it was the sweetest. "Mr. Li, Mrs. Li." Back and forth, it was enough to cause a strong blow to the single people around. Li Xiqing's lips curled up, but he did not stop moving. He responded quietly. Su Qianxi gasped and pressed his hand down, saying, "Not today." He looked up and complained, "Mrs. Li, you are cutting the benefits." "I'm doing it." Su Qianxi's voice became lower and lower. "When?" "I just found out." Li Xiqing was about to go crazy. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed her hand as a punishment and bit her white and tender finger. Su Qianxi's fingers shrank. Her eyes were apologetic and full of interest. "Little rascal." He pulled her up and moved her to the side of the pillow. Putting an arm around her waist, he whispered, "Sleep. Behave." Su Qianxi saw his embarrassed look and was in a bad mood. She chuckled. "Don't laugh." However, she smiled even more happily. Burying her head in his chest, she couldn't help but smile. Finding a comfortable position in his arms, she closed her eyes contentedly. The Tang family wouldn't let the matter rest if they couldn't find Su Qingsang after making a scene in the Li family. Li Xiqing had expected this, so when he saw a bunch of reporters at the door of the company, his expression did not change much. Seeing Li Xiqing's car coming, the reporters rushed over like crazy. The building's security guards were not to be trifled with. They immediately came forward and pushed all the reporters away, protecting them in front of the car. The back door of the black Maybach was opened, and a tall and straight figure came out. He was wearing a black cashmere coat and a dark checkered suit, looking noble and indifferent. Faced with the overwhelming number of questions, Li Xiqing glanced around coldly. Immediately, he turned around and put one hand on the back seat of the car, while the other hand was on the roof, in case the head of the person inside was hit. Even though her expression was cold, her actions were still filled with tenderness. This caused the surrounding reporters to exclaim in surprise. Chapter 363. There is someone else in the car. Who is it? Someone yelled, and all eyes focused on the back seat of the luxury car. Everyone saw a white, soft hand put on Li Xiqing's. Then, she was wearing light green high heels, a light green skirt, and a long, cream-colored coat. Her black hair was tied into a ponytail. Perhaps because of the heat in the car, her face was a bit red. Taking a closer look, people found that her skin was unbelievably smooth. Her delicate and beautiful facial features were extremely familiar to the media. It's Mrs. Li. It really is Mrs. Li. Mrs. Li, I heard that Mr. Li has a mistress. Did you know about this? At the press conference last time, Miss Tang said that she was pregnant with Mr. Li's child. Now, I heard that he has a mistress. Did you know about this? Mrs. Li, people were constantly taking photos. She frowned and reached out to hold his arm. Gathering her coat, she looked particularly calm and said, "He is not blind." Li Xiqing looked at her and said, "He is not blind." His words silenced all the voices. Li Xiqing's cold eyes became softer and he whispered, "Let's go." Okay. Led by Li Xiqing into the company, Su Qianxi was surrounded by all the jealous gazes and was taken to the top floor. Su Qianxi's words had caused a stir on Weibo. Her fans had skyrocketed by millions, almost as many as those famous bloggers on Weibo. The news that Tang Zhenghao had sent out to smear Li Xiqing and the Li Group was all swept away. In the office of the president of the Tang Group, Tang Zhenghao was furious and slammed a stack of documents down. Bastard. Last night, he had sent someone to spread the news that Li Xiqing was keeping a mistress in his house to all the bloggers and paid a lot of money to spread the news. Who would have thought that one sentence from a little girl would ruin all the effort and money he had invested? The young female secretary pushed up her glasses and said, "There is someone behind the Li Group. Hacker Z works for Li Xiqing, so it is expected that we can't beat him on the internet." How could Tang Zhenghao not understand this logic? But he couldn't take it anymore. He gritted his teeth and said, "Go, find 2 private detectives and have them follow him 24/7. Also, send the number 1 paparazzi and the number 1 gossip eye." "I don't believe I can't find my daughter." The secretary nodded. "Yes. Go find a hacker and hack into his phone and computer." "I don't believe that there are no clues at all." "Yes. Also, help me find a person. That guy is a friend of my daughter. He is very capable. His name is Rong Rui." "All right. I don't believe that Li Xiqing can do anything." Tang Zhenghao sneered. "Remember to do it cleanly and secretly." "Yes, I will definitely find someone trustworthy to do it." The secretary quickly wrote it down on a piece of paper. But soon, she looked up and said, "President Tang, it's time to meet with Xingfeng. They just called me to inform me, but the contract has changed." "How?" "Increase the contract to 5 times. Tang Zhenghao's eyes lit up. "Really? Xingfeng trusts us this much this time?" Chapter 364. Ha ha ha. The order has increased by 5 times, so of course, the penalty fee has also increased by 5 times. Did you get the materials I told you about a few days ago? Yes, they are in storage. Good. Keep an eye on them. Contact Germany and tell them that they may get 5 times the materials at any time. Tell Xingfeng that I will be there soon. Okay. The secretary nodded. However, I feel a bit strange. Xingfeng has cooperated with us so many times, but they have never given us such a large order. What happened this time? Tang Zhenghao frowned. The secretary smiled and said, "This shows that they have recognized our strength. The Tang Corporation is considered a veteran. Although it was hit by the Li Corporation 2 years ago, its development in the manufacturing industry in the past 2 years is no less than that of the Li Corporation. Perhaps this is our turning point?" Hearing that, Tang Zhenghao was very satisfied and smiled happily. Go do what you need to do. After the secretary went out, Tang Zhenghao tidied up and went out as well. He looked very pleased with himself. If they were able to complete this deal, it would be the biggest profit that Tang Corp had made in the past few years. Su Qianxi was famous. Unprecedentedly famous. She was not from the entertainment industry, but in just one day, she had become more popular than any other star on Weibo. Some media directly made a list of Su Qianxi's family background, with a striking title, "Counting the True Identity of the Rich Wives." The names of Su Qianxi and the international pianist Song Yifan were at the top, attracting a lot of attention. In the capital military, Song Yifan's daughter? Rong Haiyue looked at the news on his phone and clicked on it. He was immediately attracted by the soft and delicate face. With a smile on her lips, she looked young and energetic, satisfied, and stubborn. Rong Haiyue was fascinated. After a long while, his eyes fell on the wedding photo on the table. In the wedding photo, Rong Haiyue was smiling contentedly, while the woman next to him was smiling coldly and indifferently. Her facial features were so similar to this girl's. However, this was Song Yifan's daughter. The hand holding the phone suddenly tightened. Rong Haiyue sat up from the chair and walked outside. Rong Anna was about to go out. When she saw Rong Haiyue, she shouted, "Dad, are you going out?" Rong Haiyue responded, "I'm looking for your mother." "Where is she?" "Oh, Mom went out early in the morning." "You call her, I'm going out first." "Muabai, Dad." Her witty words made Rong Haiyue's depressed mood a little better. His eyes softened and he said, "Go." Rong Anna left with a smile. Rong Haiyue picked up the phone and dialed his wife's number. The call was quickly picked up. "Hello? Where are you?" "Art Center, Symposium," he said simply. "When are you coming back?" "What's the matter?" His tone was indifferent and distant. Rong Haiyue held the phone tightly, but he still smiled and said half-jokingly, "I miss you." After a moment of silence, he said, "Rong Haiyue, I am very busy." With that, the call was hung up. Rong Haiyue's lips curved into a self-deprecating smile. He clicked on the message bar and sent her a message, "I'm going to Kingstown for half a month." The other side quickly replied, "Have a nice trip." Sender, I love Xian. Rong Haiyue stared at these words for a long time before he slowly looked away, his eyes dim. This is the first time I've updated so much at once. Are you surprised? Is there any reason not to recommend me? Give it to me. Libao Concentration Camp 1 Group 5586433293, full. Libao Concentration Camp 2 Group 3266681054, full. Libao Concentration Camp 3 Group 587324201, full. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.